The morning mist clung to the tarmac like a shroud, and Master Sergeant Kira, Viper, Volkov could taste the metallic tang of impending disaster in the air. She'd been watching the new transfer pilot for 3 days now, and every fiber of her combat-hardened instincts screamed that something was catastrophically wrong. The rookie moved with the fluid precision of someone who'd logged serious flight hours, yet her personnel file read like a cautionary tale of administrative shuffling and medical groundings. "You seeing this, Viper?" Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez whispered, nodding toward the approaching figure. Lieutenant Zara Blackwood walked across the flight line with the quiet confidence of someone who owned the sky, her flight suit crisp despite the early hour. Her pale green eyes swept the assembled aircraft with an intensity that made seasoned mechanics pause their work. Kira's jaw tightened. "I'm seeing a pilot who's been bounced between 3 bases in 18 months, medical holds, psychological evaluations, and now they dump her here right before our biggest operation in 5 years." She spat into the gravel. "Command's either lost their minds or they're setting us up for a spectacular failure." The briefing room fell silent as Blackwood entered, her boots clicking against the polished floor. Colonel Hayes looked up from his tactical display, his weathered face revealing nothing as he studied the newcomer. "Lieutenant Blackwood, welcome to Forward Operating Base Meridian. I trust your transition has been smooth." "Yes, sir. Ready for assignment." Her voice carried the subtle rasp of someone who'd spent years breathing recycled cockpit air at altitude. Kira exchanged glances with her crew. There was something in that voice, something that didn't match the rookie designation in her file. She'd heard that particular tone before, in the voices of pilots who'd seen things that never made it into official reports. The kind of experiences that left invisible scars and created legends whispered in ready rooms across the world. "Your timing is fortuitous," Hayes continued. "We're launching Operation Crosswind at 0500 hours. Initial assessment suggests you'll be flying support missions while you integrate with our squadron protocols." Blackwood's expression didn't change, but Kira caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Support missions. Code for keeping the untested pilot safely away from anything that mattered. It was a reasonable precaution, but something about the way Blackwood accepted the assignment gnawed at Kira's instincts. Outside, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and steel. In 6 hours, they would discover that everything they thought they knew about Lieutenant Zara Blackwood was carefully constructed fiction, and the real story would reshape everything they understood about courage, sacrifice, and the price of redemption. The morning air carried the scent of aviation fuel and possibility, but beneath it lurked something else entirely. Something that would test every assumption they'd made about the quiet pilot who'd arrived with shadows in her eyes and secrets in her silence. Colonel Hayes dismissed the briefing with his usual efficiency, leaving the pilots to their pre-flight preparations. Kira lingered, watching Blackwood study the mission parameters with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The rookie traced flight paths with her finger, her lips moving silently as she calculated angles and timing that wouldn't matter for a simple support run. "You're overthinking it, Lieutenant," Kira said, approaching the tactical display. "Support missions are milk runs. Stay high, stay safe, and let the real pilots handle the heavy lifting." Blackwood looked up, and for a moment, Kira saw something flicker behind those pale green eyes, something that looked dangerously like amusement. "I appreciate the advice, Sergeant. I'm sure your experience is invaluable." The dismissal was polite but unmistakable. Kira felt her temper flare, but before she could respond, the sound of rotors echoed across the base. The first wave of helicopters was returning from their dawn reconnaissance, and the radio chatter indicated they'd found something significant. "All available personnel to the command center," Hayes's voice crackled over the intercom. "We have a situation developing." The command center buzzed with controlled chaos. Multiple screens displayed satellite imagery, radar contacts, and real-time intelligence feeds. Hayes stood at the center of it all, his expression grim as he processed the incoming data. "Gentlemen and ladies," he began, his voice cutting through the noise, "our intelligence was incomplete. What we believed to be a routine interdiction has escalated into something significantly more complex. Enemy forces have established a defensive perimeter around the target site, and their air assets are more sophisticated than anticipated." Kira felt her stomach tighten. She'd been flying missions for 12 years, and she recognized the tone in Hayes's voice. This was the kind of briefing that ended with empty bunks and flag-draped coffins. "We're looking at integrated air defense systems, possible electronic warfare capabilities, and confirmed presence of advanced fighter aircraft," Hayes continued. "This is no longer a support operation. Every pilot in this room is now mission critical." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Kira glanced at Blackwood, expecting to see the wide-eyed panic of a rookie facing her first real combat situation. Instead, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The lieutenant's expression hadn't changed, but her posture had shifted subtly. The casual confidence was gone, replaced by something predatory and focused. "Lieutenant Blackwood," Hayes said, his eyes finding her in the crowd, "I'm afraid we'll need to accelerate your integration timeline. Are you prepared for immediate combat operations?" "Yes, sir." The response came without hesitation, without the tremor that should have been there. Kira had seen dozens of pilots face their first real mission, and they all showed some sign of nerves. Blackwood showed nothing but cold professionalism. "Outstanding. You'll be flying wing with Sergeant Volkov's element. Consider this your trial by fire." As the briefing continued, Kira found herself studying Blackwood more closely. The woman's file might read like a cautionary tale, but her behavior suggested something else entirely. She absorbed tactical information with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, asked questions that revealed deeper understanding than any rookie should possess, and maintained a calm that seemed almost supernatural. The mission launch was scheduled for 1400 hours, giving them 6 hours to prepare for what was shaping up to be the most dangerous operation any of them had faced in years. But as Kira watched Blackwood walk toward the flight line, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were all missing something crucial about their new pilot. Something that would determine whether they came home alive. The armory buzzed with the familiar ritual of pre-mission preparation. Kira checked her sidearm for the third time, muscle memory guiding her hands through the motions that had kept her alive through countless deployments. Around her, other pilots performed their own sacred routines, each one a small hedge against the chaos that waited in the sky. Blackwood worked in silence at the adjacent station, her movements economical and precise. She'd selected her equipment with the confidence of someone who understood exactly what she'd need and why. No rookie mistakes, no hesitation, no seeking approval from more experienced personnel. It was professionally executed and deeply unsettling. "First time in the sandbox?" Airman Peterson asked, trying to make conversation as he handed Blackwood her flight helmet. He was young, maybe 22, with the eager helpfulness of someone who hadn't learned to read the danger signs yet. "Something like that," Blackwood replied, accepting the helmet with a nod of thanks. She ran her fingers along the communications array, checking connections with the thoroughness of someone who'd learned that small details could mean the difference between life and death. Kira watched this interaction with growing unease. There was something wrong with the picture, something that her instincts kept flagging but her conscious mind couldn't quite identify. Blackwood moved through the preparation process like she'd done it 1,000 times before, but her file suggested she'd been grounded for the better part of 2 years. "You know," Rodriguez said, joining them at the equipment check, "I've been flying with Viper for 4 years now, and I've never seen her this wound up before a mission. You must be something special to get her this rattled." Blackwood glanced at Kira, and for a moment their eyes met across the crowded armory. There was something in that look, something that suggested shared understanding of things that couldn't be spoken aloud. Then the moment passed, and Blackwood returned to her preparations. "I'm sure the sergeant has her reasons," she said diplomatically. "Experience is valuable, and healthy skepticism keeps people alive." The diplomatic response only deepened Kira's suspicions. Most rookies would have bristled at the suggestion they were being watched and evaluated. Blackwood accepted it with the grace of someone who understood the game being played and her role in it. The afternoon briefing brought new complications. Intelligence had identified additional threats, and the mission parameters had shifted again. What had started as a simple interdiction was now a full-scale combat operation with multiple phases and contingency plans that stretched the capabilities of their squadron to its limits. "The enemy has mobile surface-to-air missile systems," Hayes explained, highlighting positions on the tactical display. "We'll need to neutralize these before the primary assault can commence. Lieutenant Blackwood, you'll be flying close air support for the ground teams tasked with eliminating these threats." Kira felt her jaw drop. Close air support was one of the most dangerous and demanding roles in modern warfare. It required split-second decision-making, intimate knowledge of ground tactics, and the ability to operate in the most hazardous airspace imaginable. Assigning it to a rookie was either desperate leadership or calculated madness. "Sir," she interjected, "perhaps someone with more recent combat experience should handle the CAS role." "I could." "Sergeant Volkov," Hayes interrupted, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of an order disguised as a suggestion. "You'll be leading the air superiority element. Your job is to keep the sky clear so Lieutenant Blackwood can do hers." The assignments were final, and the room began to empty as pilots headed for their aircraft. Kira lingered, watching Blackwood study the mission parameters one final time. There was something almost ritualistic about the way she memorized every detail, as if she were preparing for something far more significant than a routine combat mission. "Lieutenant," Kira said, approaching the tactical display, "CAS is unforgiving work. One mistake and you're responsible for friendly casualties. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Blackwood looked up, and for the first time since her arrival, Kira saw something genuine in her expression. It wasn't fear or uncertainty, but something deeper and more complex. Something that looked like resolve tempered by painful experience. "I'm ready, Sergeant, more ready than you know." The flight line hummed with the controlled chaos of combat preparation. Ground crews swarmed over aircraft, checking systems, loading ordnance, and performing the thousand small tasks that would determine whether their pilots returned home alive. The afternoon sun painted everything in harsh shadows, creating a landscape of metal and purpose that spoke to the serious business at hand. Kira's F-16 Fighting Falcon sat ready, its sleek profile bristling with air-to-air missiles and the electronic warfare pods that would give her an edge in the contested airspace ahead. She'd flown this particular aircraft for 2 years now, and it had become an extension of her will, responding to her thoughts as much as her hands. 3 hardstands down, Blackwood conducted her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision. Her assigned A-10 Thunderbolt II was a different beast entirely, built for low-altitude operations and designed to survive the kind of punishment that would destroy lesser aircraft. The massive GAU-8 cannon mounted in its nose could destroy main battle tanks with armor-piercing rounds, and its wing pylons carried enough ordnance to level a small city. "You know how to fly that thing?" Rodriguez asked, joining Kira at her aircraft. He'd been assigned to her element for the air superiority mission, and his easy humor couldn't quite mask the tension in his voice. "I've got a few hours in the Warthog," Kira replied, running her hand along her aircraft's wing. "But I've never seen anyone fly close air support on their first mission with a new squadron. Either Hayes has lost his mind, or there's something about our new pilot that isn't in her file." "Maybe she's just that good," Rodriguez suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it either. The radio crackled to life with the voice of the tower controller, beginning the sequence that would launch 47 aircraft into harm's way. Kira climbed into her cockpit, the familiar embrace of the ejection seat and instrument panel, providing a measure of comfort in the uncertainty ahead. Meridian Tower, this is Viper 1. Request permission to taxi. Viper 1, Meridian Tower, you are cleared to taxi to runway 07. Wind is 080 at 15 knots. The taxi to the runway gave Kira time to think, and thinking was dangerous before a mission. She'd learned to trust her instincts over the years, and every instinct she possessed was screaming that something was wrong. Not with the mission itself, but with the narrative they'd all been fed about Lieutenant Zara Blackwood. The rookie pilot's voice came over the radio, calm and professional as she requested taxi clearance. Meridian Tower, this is Reaper 07. Request permission to taxi. Reaper 07. The call sign assignment was interesting, Kira thought. Call signs were usually earned through some combination of personality, incident, or squadron tradition. But Reaper suggested something darker, something that spoke to the business of dealing death from above. Reaper 07, you are cleared to taxi. Follow the F-16 element to the runway. The formation took shape on the taxiway, 47 aircraft, representing the concentrated striking power of a modern air force. Kira could see Blackwood's A-10 in her mirrors, the distinctive twin-engine design unmistakable even in the heat shimmer rising from the tarmac. All aircraft, this is Meridian Tower. You are cleared for takeoff in sequence. Good hunting. Kira pushed her throttle forward, feeling the familiar surge of acceleration as her aircraft gathered speed. The moment of rotation came naturally, the ground falling away as she climbed into the hostile sky that would test every assumption they'd made about courage, competence, and the price of underestimating the quiet pilot who'd arrived with shadows in her eyes. Behind her, Blackwood's A-10 lifted off with the graceful power of a predator taking flight. In 30 minutes, they would discover that everything they thought they knew about Lieutenant Zara Blackwood was carefully constructed fiction, and the real story would reshape everything they understood about redemption, sacrifice, and the weight of secrets carried in silence. The sky ahead was clear, but the horizon promised violence that would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The flight to the combat zone passed in tense silence, broken only by the routine radio calls that marked their progress toward the target area. Kira monitored multiple frequencies, tracking the movement of friendly forces and the electronic signatures that would herald the presence of enemy aircraft. The mission was complex enough without the added variable of an unknown pilot flying one of the most dangerous roles in modern warfare. Viper 1, this is Overlord. We have multiple radar contacts bearing 045, range 80 miles and closing. Recommend you begin your intercept. Overlord Viper 1 copies, beginning intercept sequence. Kira banked her aircraft toward the incoming threats, her wingman following in perfect formation. The enemy had finally revealed themselves, and the dance of modern air combat was about to begin. But even as she focused on the immediate tactical situation, part of her attention remained fixed on the A-10 flying 30 miles to the south. Reaper 07, this is Overlord. Ground teams are in position and ready for your support. You have multiple targets of opportunity in Sector 77. Overlord Reaper 07 copies, beginning my attack run. The calm professionalism in Blackwood's voice struck Kira as wrong for a pilot facing her first combat mission. There should have been tension, uncertainty, or at least some acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation. Instead, she sounded like someone settling into a familiar routine. The first missile exchange came without warning, a deadly ballet of electronic warfare and high-speed projectiles that turned the sky into a maze of contrails and chaff. Kira's radar warning receiver screamed as enemy missiles locked onto her aircraft, forcing her into a series of defensive maneuvers that tested the limits of both her aircraft and her physical endurance. Viper 1, break left. Sam, launch from your 2 o'clock. The missile passed close enough for Kira to see the exhaust plume, a reminder of just how thin the line was between life and death at these altitudes. She rolled inverted and pulled hard, using her aircraft's superior maneuverability to evade the subsequent shots that followed. Overlord Viper 1, I'm engaged with multiple bandits. Reaper 07, you need to abort your attack run. The sky is too hot for close air support. The response came immediately, but not from Blackwood. Viper 1, this is Overlord. Reaper 07 is cleared to continue her mission. Repeat, cleared to continue. Kira felt her blood run cold. The air was filled with missiles, enemy fighters, and the electronic chaos of modern warfare. Sending a rookie pilot into that environment was tantamount to murder. But before she could protest, another voice cut through the radio chatter. Viper 1, this is Reaper 07. I have visual on ground targets and am beginning my attack run. Keep the sky clear for me. The tone was different now, stripped of all pretense and bureaucratic politeness. This was the voice of someone who'd done this before, someone who understood exactly what was required and had the confidence to execute it regardless of the odds. Kira's radar warning receiver fell silent as she successfully evaded the last of the incoming missiles, leaving her free to observe what happened next. Through her heads-up display, she could see the descending toward the target area, its flight path taking it directly through the most dangerous airspace in the theater. What she witnessed next would haunt her for the rest of her career. The A-10 didn't just attack the enemy positions. It systematically dismantled them with a precision that spoke to intimate knowledge of ground tactics and an understanding of battlefield dynamics that took years to develop. Each pass was perfectly executed, each target carefully selected for maximum tactical impact. Jesus Christ, Rodriguez whispered over the radio. Who the hell is flying that thing? But Kira was beginning to understand that the question wasn't who was flying the A-10. The question was who Lieutenant Zara Blackwood really was, and why her presence at Forward Operating Base Meridian was no accident. The battle raged for 43 minutes, a complex dance of aircraft and missiles that transformed the sky into a lethal maze of contrails and electronic warfare. Kira found herself fighting not just the enemy, but her own assumptions about the pilot flying close air support below. Each radio transmission from Blackwood revealed deeper tactical knowledge, and each attack run demonstrated skills that couldn't be learned in training simulators. Reaper 07, this is Ground Team Alpha. We have enemy armor moving to flank our position. Can you assist? Ground Team Alpha, Reaper 07. I have visual on 3 T-80 main battle tanks bearing 270 from your position. Recommend you move to cover and designate targets. The exchange was crisp and professional, but what followed was nothing short of artistry. Blackwood's A-10 dove through concentrated anti-aircraft fire, its GAU-8 cannon speaking in the characteristic growl that had earned the aircraft its nickname. The first tank erupted in flames, its ammunition cooking off in a series of secondary explosions that lit the battlefield like a deadly fireworks display. "Holy shit," came a voice over the radio, quickly followed by the reprimand from the ground controller. But Kira understood the sentiment. She'd seen close air support before, but never with this level of precision and tactical awareness. The second tank tried to evade, its crew recognizing the threat and attempting to reach cover in a nearby tree line. But Blackwood anticipated the movement, positioning her aircraft for a perfect deflection shot that caught the tank at the moment of maximum vulnerability. The armor-piercing rounds punched through the vehicle's side armor, turning it into a funeral pyre for its crew. Viper 1, this is Overlord. We have additional bandits inbound from the northeast. Can you intercept? Kira forced herself to focus on her own mission, but the demonstration below had shaken her understanding of everything she thought she knew about their new pilot. The file said medical grounding, administrative shuffling, and psychological evaluations. The performance suggested someone with extensive combat experience and skills that bordered on the supernatural. The third tank had reached cover, but it made no difference. Blackwood's attack came from an unexpected angle, her aircraft skimming the terrain at an altitude that should have been impossible for safe flight. The cannon shells found their mark with surgical precision, and the battlefield fell silent except for the crackling of flames and the distant sound of the A-10's engines. Ground Team Alpha, this is Reaper 07. All hostile armor neutralized. You are clear to advance. Reaper 07, Ground Team Alpha. Outstanding work. We've never seen anything like that. Neither had Kira. In 12 years of flying, she'd witnessed some exceptional pilots, but nothing that approached the level of skill and tactical awareness she just observed. The question that haunted her was simple. If Lieutenant Zara Blackwood was capable of this level of performance, why had she been shuffled between bases and subjected to medical groundings? The answer came to her in a moment of clarity that made her blood run cold. The medical groundings weren't punitive, they were protective. The administrative shuffling wasn't incompetence, it was careful management of a resource too valuable to risk in routine operations. And the psychological evaluations weren't questioning her competence, they were assessing her readiness to return to the kind of missions that had originally forged her skills. All aircraft, this is Overlord. Primary objectives have been achieved. Begin recovery operations. The flight home was conducted in silence, each pilot processing what they'd witnessed and trying to reconcile it with their preconceptions. Kira found herself studying Blackwood's A-10 in her mirrors, watching the way it moved through the air with the confidence of a predator returning from a successful hunt. The landing approach gave her time to think, and thinking was dangerous after a mission like this. She'd built her career on reading people and situations, and every instinct she possessed was screaming that Lieutenant Zara Blackwood was not who she appeared to be. The question was whether that made her an asset or a threat, and the answer would determine how Kira chose to handle the conversation that was coming. The debriefing room was thick with tension and the lingering smell of adrenaline. Pilots sat in their assigned seats, flight suits still damp with sweat, trying to process what they'd witnessed during the mission. Colonel Hayes stood at the front of the room, his expression carefully neutral as he reviewed the preliminary reports flowing in from multiple sources. "Gentlemen and ladies," he began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much combat to be surprised by anything. "Today's mission exceeded all expectations. Primary objectives were achieved with minimal losses, and the enemy's defensive capabilities have been significantly degraded." Kira watched Blackwood from across the room, nodding the way she sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap, eyes focused on Hayes with the attention of someone who'd been through this routine countless times before. No celebration, no visible relief, just professional interest in the mission assessment. The close air support provided by Lieutenant Blackwood was particularly effective, Hayes continued. Ground teams report that her intervention was decisive in neutralizing enemy armor and allowing the advance to continue on schedule. A murmur ran through the room. Effective was military understatement for what they'd all witnessed. Blackwood had single-handedly eliminated an entire armored unit while under fire, demonstrating skills that took years to develop and nerves that came from extensive combat experience. "Lieutenant," Hayes said, his attention focusing on Blackwood, "your performance today was exceptional. Would you care to share your thoughts on the mission?" Blackwood stood, her movement fluid and controlled. "The enemy's defensive posture was predictable, sir. Their armor was positioned for intimidation rather than tactical advantage, and their anti-aircraft systems were poorly integrated. Standard close air support tactics were sufficient to neutralize the threats." "Standard tactics," Kira felt her jaw tighten. What they'd witnessed was anything but standard, and the casual way Blackwood dismissed her own performance only deepened the mystery surrounding her background. Any lessons learned that might benefit future operations? Hayes asked. The enemy's electronic warfare capabilities were more sophisticated than our intelligence suggested, Blackwood replied. I recommend additional countermeasures for future missions in this theater. The observation was tactically sound and professionally delivered, but it raised another question in Kira's mind. How had a rookie pilot been able to assess enemy electronic warfare capabilities so quickly and accurately? The answer suggested experience with classified systems and threats that didn't appear in standard training curricula. Thank you, Lieutenant. Please remain available for individual debriefing sessions. As the room emptied, Kira found herself walking beside Blackwood toward the exit. The moment felt significant, like a crossroads where she would have to choose between professional courtesy and the questions that were eating at her. Hell of a first mission, she said, testing the waters. Yes, it was, Blackwood replied, her tone carefully neutral. Your air superiority work was excellent. The sky stayed clear exactly when it needed to. The compliment was genuine, but it also felt like a deflection. Kira had the sense that Blackwood was as skilled at managing conversations as she was at flying close air support, and that both abilities came from the same source of hard-won experience. I've been flying for 12 years, Kira said, and I've never seen close air support like that. Where did you learn to fly like that? Blackwood paused at the exit, her hand on the door handle. For a moment, Kira thought she was going to answer honestly, but then the professional mask slipped back into place. Training and natural aptitude, I suppose. The A-10 is a forgiving aircraft for pilots who understand its capabilities. The non-answer was expertly delivered, but it only confirmed Kira's suspicions. Lieutenant Zara Blackwood was hiding something significant, and the stakes of that secret were higher than anyone at Forward Operating Base Meridian understood. The officers' club was unusually quiet that evening, the post-mission euphoria tempered by the questions that lingered in everyone's mind. Kira sat at the bar, nursing a beer and trying to reconcile what she'd witnessed with the official narrative they'd all been fed. Around her, other pilots engaged in the familiar ritual of post-mission analysis, their voices carrying the mixture of relief and confusion that came from surviving something they didn't fully understand. She's not a rookie, Rodriguez said, settling onto the adjacent barstool. I don't care what her file says. Nobody flies close air support like that without extensive combat experience. Maybe she's just naturally gifted, suggested Captain Williams, though his tone indicated he didn't believe it either. Some people have an instinct for this kind of work. Kira shook her head. Instinct doesn't teach you enemy electronic warfare capabilities or optimal attack angles for main battle tanks. That's knowledge that comes from repeated exposure to real-world threats. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Hayes, who approached the bar with the measured steps of someone carrying significant news. The pilots fell silent, recognizing the expression on their commander's face as the look of someone who'd just received classified information that would change everything. Sergeant Volkov, he said, his voice carrying the formal tone that preceded important conversations. I need to speak with you privately. The walk to Hayes's office was conducted in silence, but Kira could feel the weight of revelation approaching. The office itself was spartanly furnished, dominated by a desk covered in classified documents and a secure telephone that connected directly to higher headquarters. Close the door and have a seat, Hayes instructed, waiting until Kira had complied before continuing. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels, and it doesn't leave this room under any circumstances. Kira nodded, her mind racing through the possibilities. Classification levels that high suggested black operations, special access programs, or activities that officially didn't exist. Lieutenant Blackwood's personnel file is a fabrication, Hayes began, his words hitting Kira like a physical blow. Her real background is classified under a compartmented special access program that requires presidential authorization to access. The revelation was staggering, but it answered so many questions that had been haunting Kira since Blackwood's arrival. The skills, the knowledge, the unnatural calm under pressure, all of it made sense if the rookie pilot persona was carefully constructed fiction. How much of it is fake? Kira asked. All of it. Her name, her service record, her training history, everything in her official file is designed to provide cover for her real background. What I can tell you is that she's been flying combat missions for over a decade, and her actual experience level is significantly higher than anyone else in this squadron. The implications were staggering. If Blackwood had been flying combat missions for over a decade, that meant she'd been involved in conflicts that didn't officially exist, operations that were conducted in the shadows of international politics and classified beyond the reach of normal military channels. "Why are you telling me this?" Kira asked. "Because I need someone I trust to watch her back," Hayes replied. "The mission we flew today was a test, both of our squadron's capabilities and of Lieutenant Blackwood's readiness to return to active operations. Based on her performance, I expect we'll be receiving new orders within the next 24 hours." The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Blackwood hadn't been assigned to Forward Operating Base Meridian by accident. She'd been positioned there deliberately, waiting for the right moment to emerge from whatever shadows had hidden her for the past 2 years. "What kind of new orders?" Kira asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "The kind that officially don't exist," Hayes replied, "and the kind that require pilots with very specific skills and very flexible consciences." The secure briefing room was a stark contrast to the informal atmosphere of the squadron-ready room. Windowless walls lined with acoustic dampening material, swept daily for electronic surveillance devices, and equipped with communication systems that connected directly to the highest levels of the defense establishment. Kira had been in rooms like this before, but never for a briefing that would fundamentally alter her understanding of her own military service. Colonel Hayes stood at the front of the room, flanked by 2 men in civilian clothes whose presence radiated the quiet authority of intelligence operatives. Lieutenant Blackwood sat in the front row, her expression carefully neutral, but Kira could see the subtle changes in her posture that suggested she was finally dropping the pretense of being a rookie pilot. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hayes began, his voice carrying the gravity of someone about to reveal state secrets, "what you're about to hear is classified at the highest levels of government. This briefing is being conducted under the authority of special access programs that require presidential approval to initiate." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Presidential authority meant operations that existed in the gray areas of international law, missions that were conducted with full deniability and zero official acknowledgement. 3 years ago, a joint task force was established to conduct operations in regions where conventional military action was politically impossible. Hayes continued. This task force operated under deep cover, using carefully constructed identities and classified capabilities to achieve objectives that couldn't be accomplished through traditional means. Kira felt her understanding of the world shifting. The wars she'd been fighting had been the visible surface of a much larger conflict, one that extended into areas she'd never imagined. Lieutenant Blackwood was a founding member of this task force, Hayes said, his words transforming everything they thought they knew about their quiet newcomer. For 3 years, she flew missions that officially never happened in airspace that didn't exist, against enemies that were never acknowledged. The revelation was staggering. Blackwood hadn't been grounded for medical reasons or shuffled between bases due to administrative incompetence. She'd been operating in the deepest shadows of military operations, conducting missions that required skills and knowledge far beyond anything taught in conventional training programs. The task force was disbanded 18 months ago following a mission that resulted in significant casualties. Hayes continued. The surviving members were reassigned to conventional units and given new identities to protect both their safety and the security of the programs they'd been involved in. Kira glanced at Blackwood, finally understanding the source of the shadows she'd seen in those pale green eyes. The rookie pilot persona hadn't been professional necessity. It had been psychological armor, protection against memories that couldn't be shared or officially acknowledged. Recent intelligence has identified a new threat that requires the unique capabilities possessed by former task force members, Hayes said. Lieutenant Blackwood has been recalled to active special operations status, and this squadron has been designated as her cover unit. The implications were clear. Their routine combat operations were about to become something far more complex and dangerous. They weren't just pilots anymore. They were actors in a drama that played out in the shadows of international politics. Sergeant Volkov, Hayes said, his attention focusing on Kira, you've been selected to serve as Lieutenant Blackwood's partner for these operations. Your tactical skills and leadership abilities make you ideal for this role. Partnership. The word carried weight that extended far beyond military rank or squadron organization. It suggested shared responsibility for missions that couldn't be acknowledged and consequences that couldn't be discussed. What kind of operations are we talking about? Kira asked. The answer came from one of the civilians, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who'd spent years managing information that could reshape international relations. The kind that require pilots who can operate without official support, in hostile territory, against enemies who don't officially exist. The mission planning session stretched deep into the night, transforming the secure briefing room into a maze of classified documents, satellite imagery, and tactical assessments that painted a picture of complexity that made their previous operations seem like training exercises. Kira found herself immersed in intelligence briefings that revealed threats she'd never imagined and capabilities that challenged her understanding of modern warfare. The target is a research facility operating under the cover of a civilian pharmaceutical company, the intelligence officer explained, his laser pointer highlighting a compound on the satellite imagery. Intelligence suggests they're developing weaponized biological agents for an international terrorist network. The facility appeared innocuous from above, a collection of modern buildings surrounded by manicured grounds and security fencing that looked more appropriate for a corporate headquarters than a weapons development site. But Kira had learned to read between the lines of intelligence briefings, and the carefully neutral language suggested threats that extended far beyond conventional weapons. The challenge, Blackwood said, speaking for the first time since the briefing began, is that the facility is located in a country that's technically neutral. Any overt military action would create a diplomatic crisis that could destabilize the entire region. Her analysis was tactically sound and politically astute, revealing the kind of strategic thinking that came from years of operating in the gray areas between war and peace. Kira was beginning to understand that Blackwood's expertise extended far beyond flying aircraft. She was a specialist in the kind of operations that required equal measures of military skill and political sophistication. Which is why this mission requires a very specific approach, Hayes said. The facility must be neutralized without leaving any evidence of military involvement. It has to look like an industrial accident or internal security failure. The requirements were staggering. They needed to penetrate heavily defended airspace, destroy a hardened target, and extract without leaving any evidence of their presence. It was the kind of mission that pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible and politically acceptable. "What's the timeline?" Kira asked. 72 hours, came the reply. Intelligence suggests the facility is preparing to transfer their research to another location. If we don't act within the next 3 days, the target will be beyond our reach. The compressed timeline added another layer of complexity to an already impossible mission. They would need to plan, rehearse, and execute one of the most sensitive operations in modern military history, with less time than most squadrons spent preparing for routine training exercises. "The good news," Blackwood said, her tone carrying the dry humor of someone who'd learned to find dark amusement in impossible situations, "is that we won't be going in alone. The facility has internal security vulnerabilities that can be exploited to create the diversion we need." The statement revealed another layer of the operation's complexity. They weren't just conducting an airstrike. They were coordinating with ground assets, intelligence operatives, and cyber warfare specialists to create a precisely orchestrated sequence of events that would achieve their objectives while maintaining plausible deniability. "How do you know about the security vulnerabilities?" Kira asked. Blackwood's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes that suggested memories she couldn't share. "I've been inside that facility before, Sergeant, 3 years ago under different circumstances." The revelation was another piece of the puzzle that was Lieutenant Zara Blackwood's true background. She wasn't just a pilot who'd been recalled to special operations. She was someone who'd been involved in the intelligence gathering that had identified this target in the first place. "The mission will be conducted in 3 phases, Hayes continued, apparently unsurprised by Blackwood's disclosure. "Phase 1 involves penetrating the target area's air defenses. Phase 2 is the actual strike on the facility. Phase 3 is extraction and cover story implementation." Each phase carried its own risks and challenges, but the cumulative effect was a mission that required precision, timing, and skills that pushed the boundaries of what any pilot could be expected to accomplish. "Equipment and aircraft selection will be critical," Blackwood added. "We'll need systems that can operate in electronic warfare environments while maintaining stealth characteristics. Standard-issue aircraft won't be sufficient." The statement raised questions about what kind of aircraft and equipment would be available for a mission that officially didn't exist. The answer would determine whether they were being asked to perform the impossible or merely the extremely difficult. The hangar that housed their mission aircraft was located in a section of the base that didn't appear on any official maps. Access required special authorization codes that changed daily, and the security protocols were more stringent than anything Kira had encountered in her conventional military career. The aircraft themselves were unlike anything she'd seen before, combining familiar design elements with modifications that suggested capabilities far beyond standard military specifications. "F-35 Lightning II variants," Blackwood explained, running her hand along the wing of the lead aircraft. "Modified for special operations with enhanced stealth characteristics, extended range, and electronic warfare capabilities that don't officially exist." The aircraft were beautiful in the way that only purpose-built machines could be, their sleek lines speaking to the marriage of engineering excellence and operational necessity. But Kira could see the modifications that marked them as something beyond conventional military hardware. Antenna arrays that suggested advanced communication systems, weapon pylons configured for ordnance that wasn't part of standard inventories, and engine modifications that promised performance characteristics that pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible. "How many hours do you have in the Lightning?" Kira asked. "Enough," Blackwood replied, her tone carrying the confidence of someone who'd pushed these aircraft to their limits under conditions that couldn't be officially acknowledged. "The handling characteristics are similar to conventional F-35s, but the performance envelope is significantly expanded." The maintenance crew working on the aircraft moved with the quiet efficiency of personnel who'd been cleared for the highest levels of classified operations. They spoke in the shorthand of specialists who understood that every system, every component, every detail could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The weapon's loadout is unconventional, Blackwood continued, indicating the ordnance that was being carefully installed on the aircraft's internal weapon bays. We'll be carrying a combination of precision-guided munitions and specialized payloads designed for specific target sets. Kira studied the weapons, noting configurations she'd never seen before. Some appeared to be standard air-to-ground missiles, but others had the distinctive characteristics of weapons designed for very specific purposes. The implications were unsettling, suggesting that the mission involved more than simple target destruction. The electronic warfare suite is the real game changer, Blackwood said, leading Kira to a display panel that showed the aircraft's system status. These birds can operate in the most sophisticated threat environments without detection, and they can manipulate enemy systems in ways that aren't possible with conventional platforms. The capabilities being described went far beyond anything Kira had encountered in her conventional military career. The aircraft weren't just weapons platforms. They were integrated systems designed to operate in the gray areas of modern conflict, where the line between military action and intelligence operation became increasingly blurred. Flight planning for this mission is unlike anything you've done before, Blackwood continued. We'll be operating in controlled airspace, coordinating with assets you'll never see, and maintaining communication through channels that don't officially exist. The complexity was staggering, but it also explained why pilots with Blackwood's background were necessary for these operations. Conventional military training prepared pilots for combat within established parameters, but missions like this required skills and knowledge that could only be gained through experience in operations that pushed the boundaries of what was officially possible. The timeline is aggressive, Kira observed, studying the mission profile displayed on the aircraft's mission planning system. We'll need to maintain precise timing across multiple phases while adapting to changing conditions in real time. Which is why we'll be flying as a team, Blackwood said. Your tactical skills combined with my operational experience give us the best chance of success. The statement carried weight that extended beyond professional courtesy. In the world of special operations, partnerships were forged through shared risk and mutual dependence. The mission they were about to undertake would test both their individual capabilities and their ability to function as a cohesive unit under conditions that would challenge everything they thought they knew about flying, fighting, and surviving in the modern battle space. The hangar lights dimmed automatically as the evening shift began, but the preparation continued. In 18 hours, they would launch into a mission that would test every skill they possessed and push the boundaries of what was technically and politically possible. The final briefing began at 400 hours, conducted in the pre-dawn darkness that had become synonymous with operations that pushed the boundaries of official acknowledgement. Kira found herself in the familiar position of absorbing last-minute intelligence updates, weather reports, and tactical modifications that would shape the mission's execution. But nothing about this briefing felt familiar, from the security protocols to the revelation of capabilities that challenged her understanding of what was possible. Latest intelligence indicates the target facility has implemented additional security measures, the intelligence officer reported, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who'd spent years managing information that could reshape international relations. They've activated dormant air defense systems and increased their electronic warfare capabilities. The news was troubling but not unexpected. Targets of this significance rarely remained static, and the facility's operators would have been monitoring for signs of increased interest from hostile intelligence services. The additional security measures suggested they were aware of the threat, but uncertain of its nature or timing. The enhanced defenses actually work in our favor, Blackwood observed, her analysis carrying the confidence of someone who'd learned to find advantage in apparent disadvantage. Their electronic warfare systems will create additional electromagnetic interference that will help mask our approach. The statement revealed another layer of the operational complexity they were dealing with. Modern warfare had become as much about managing electronic signatures and information warfare as it was about traditional kinetic engagement. The ability to exploit enemy defensive measures required skills and knowledge that went far beyond conventional pilot training. Weather conditions are marginal but acceptable, the meteorologist reported. Cloud cover will provide additional concealment, but turbulence at mission altitude may affect precision weapon delivery. The weather briefing was routine in its presentation, but critical in its implications. The mission timeline left no room for delays or second chances, and atmospheric conditions would directly impact their ability to achieve the precision required for success, while maintaining the operational security that would prevent international incident. Asset coordination has been finalized, Hayes announced, his words carrying the weight of information that couldn't be fully shared even in this secure environment. Ground teams are in position, cyber warfare elements are prepared to initiate their sequence, and extraction protocols have been established. The coordination requirements were staggering. The mission involved not just the two aircraft and their pilots, but ground teams, intelligence operatives, cyber warfare specialists, and diplomatic personnel who would manage the political aftermath of actions that couldn't be officially acknowledged. Rules of engagement are unique for this mission, one of the civilian advisors added, his tone carrying the careful precision of someone who'd spent years crafting language that provided operational flexibility while maintaining legal protection. You are authorized to engage any threats to mission success, but all actions must be consistent with the requirement for plausible deniability. The rules of engagement were a masterpiece of bureaucratic language that essentially authorized whatever actions were necessary while providing legal cover for operations that existed in the gray areas of international law. It was the kind of authorization that came with both significant freedom and enormous responsibility. Questions? Hayes asked, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of uncertainty or hesitation. Kira had dozens of questions, but she understood that many of them couldn't be answered in this forum. The mission they were about to undertake existed in the spaces between official policy and operational necessity, and success would depend as much on their ability to adapt to unknown variables as on their technical skills. Time to launch is 45 minutes, Hayes announced. Good luck, and remember, this conversation never happened. The dismissal was both routine and profound. In 45 minutes, they would launch into a mission that would test every assumption they'd made about their capabilities, their courage, and their understanding of the price of operating in the shadows of international politics. The hangar was quiet except for the sound of final preparations, but Kira could feel the weight of history approaching. Whatever happened in the next few hours would reshape everything they understood about warfare, diplomacy, and the price of secrets that couldn't be shared. The pre-flight ritual took on special significance as Kira methodically checked every system, every connection, every detail that would determine whether she returned home alive. The modified F-35 responded to her touch with the precision of a finely tuned instrument, its systems more sophisticated than anything she'd encountered in conventional military service. But beneath the technological complexity lay the fundamental relationship between pilot and aircraft that transcended the boundaries of classification levels and operational security. "Com check," Blackwood's voice came through the encrypted communication system, clear and professional despite the electronic warfare countermeasures that surrounded their aircraft. "Reaper 07, this is Viper 1, com check good. Kira responded, nodding the way Blackwood had retained her call sign despite the transition to special operations. Some traditions transcended organizational boundaries, and the call sign represented continuity with the pilot she'd been before the world of classified operations had claimed her. Tower, this is Reaper 07. Request taxi clearance for special operations. The response came from a controller who understood the weight of the words being exchanged. Reaper 07, you are cleared to taxi. Winds are calm, visibility unlimited. Safe hunting. The taxi to the runway was conducted in radio silence, but Kira could feel the presence of other aircraft in the darkness around them. The mission involved more than just two modified F-35s, and the additional assets would remain invisible until the moment they were needed. It was a reminder that special operations were never conducted in isolation, but as part of larger orchestrations that involved capabilities and personnel that couldn't be acknowledged. Reaper 07, you are cleared for takeoff. Godspeed. The acceleration was smooth and powerful, the modified engines providing thrust that pushed the aircraft beyond the performance envelope of conventional variants. Kira felt the familiar sensation of rotation, the moment when the aircraft transitioned from earthbound machine to instrument of flight. But this time, the feeling carried additional weight. They weren't just taking off. They were launching into a mission that would test every assumption about what was possible in the modern battle space. Viper 1, this is Reaper 07. Climb to flight level 390 and maintain heading 045. We'll be receiving updated routing instructions once we're airborne. The climb to altitude gave Kira time to familiarize herself with the aircraft's enhanced capabilities, but it also provided an opportunity to observe Blackwood's flying techniques. The other pilot moved her aircraft with the confidence of someone who'd pushed these systems to their limits, but there was also a subtle artistry to her control inputs that spoke to years of experience in operations that demanded perfection. Viper 1, this is Overlord. You are now entering restricted airspace. Maintain current heading and altitude until further notice. The transition into restricted airspace was marked by the activation of electronic warfare systems that created a bubble of invisibility around their aircraft. The transformation was subtle but profound, as if they'd suddenly become ghosts in the machine of modern air defense networks. Reaper 07, this is Overlord. Target area weather is clear, defensive systems are active, and ground assets are in position. You are cleared to proceed to Phase Line Alpha. The mission was officially underway, but Kira understood that the real challenges lay ahead. The approach to the target would test every system on their aircraft, every skill they possessed, and every assumption they'd made about their ability to operate in the most sophisticated threat environment imaginable. Viper 1, this is Reaper 07. Welcome to the Shadow World. From this point forward, we're operating in the spaces between official policy and operational necessity. The statement carried both warning and invitation. They were about to discover what it meant to operate in the gray areas of modern conflict, where success was measured not just in military objectives achieved, but in the ability to maintain the fiction that the mission had never happened. The approach to the target area was conducted through airspace that existed in the gaps between national boundaries and international law. Kira found herself flying through corridors that had been carefully mapped by intelligence assets, following flight paths that avoided radar coverage, while maintaining the precise timing required for coordination with ground operations that remained invisible to conventional intelligence gathering. Viper 1, this is Reaper 07. We're approaching the electronic warfare boundary. Switch to emission control protocols and maintain radio silence until further notice. The transition to EMCON was like entering a different world. The constant chatter of radio communication that had accompanied every mission in Kira's career suddenly ceased, replaced by the electronic silence that was essential for operations that couldn't be detected by enemy intelligence systems. Navigation became a matter of precision flying and dead reckoning, skills that had been largely supplanted by GPS and satellite communication in conventional operations. The target facility appeared on their sensors as a cluster of heat signature and electronic emissions, but Kira could see that the intelligence briefings had understated the complexity of the defensive systems they would face. The facility wasn't just protected by conventional air defenses. It was surrounded by a layered defense network that included electronic warfare systems, cyber warfare capabilities, and what appeared to be automated defensive systems that didn't fit any known threat profile. "Jesus," she whispered, forgetting the radio silence as she absorbed the scope of the defensive systems they would need to penetrate. Blackwood's response came through the secure communication system, her voice carrying the calm of someone who'd faced similar challenges before. "It's more complex than our intelligence suggested, but the basic approach remains sound. We'll use the facility's own defensive systems to mask our attack." The statement revealed another layer of the operational sophistication they were dealing with. The mission wasn't just about penetrating enemy defenses. It was about manipulating those defenses to create the conditions for success while maintaining the operational security that would prevent international incident. "Overlord, this is Reaper 07. We have visual on the target and are beginning our attack sequence. Ground assets should initiate their diversion in 60 seconds. The response came immediately, confirming that the coordination between air and ground assets was proceeding according to plan. "Reaper 07, this is Overlord. Ground assets are in position and ready to execute. You are cleared to engage the target." The attack sequence began with the activation of electronic warfare systems that created a bubble of confusion around the target facility. Enemy radar systems began tracking phantom aircraft that didn't exist, while communication networks experienced failures that appeared to be the result of equipment malfunction rather than hostile action. "Viper 1, this is Reaper 07. I'm beginning my attack run. Maintain overwatch and be prepared to engage any threats that emerge." The attack run was a masterpiece of precision flying and tactical awareness. Blackwood's aircraft descended through the defensive systems with the confidence of someone who understood exactly how those systems operated and how they could be exploited. The weapon's release was timed to coincide with additional diversions created by ground assets, creating a sequence of events that would appear to be an industrial accident rather than military action. The explosion that followed was visible from 50 miles away, a pillar of fire that marked the destruction of research that would never be officially acknowledged. But even as the target burned, Kira could see that the mission's most challenging phase was just beginning. "Viper 1, this is Reaper 07. Target destroyed. Beginning extraction sequence." The extraction would prove to be more complex than the attack, requiring them to navigate through airspace that was now fully alert to their presence, while maintaining the operational security that would prevent the mission from being traced back to its origins. "Overlord, this is Reaper 07. Phase 2 complete. Requesting extraction routing." The response came with coordinates that would take them through airspace that officially didn't exist, following flight paths that had been carefully prepared to avoid detection, while providing the political cover necessary for operations that pushed the boundaries of international law. The extraction route took them through airspace that existed in the margins of official maps, following corridors that had been negotiated through diplomatic channels that couldn't be acknowledged. Kira found herself flying through the reality of modern conflict, where military action and political necessity created operational requirements that challenged every assumption about sovereignty, international law, and the nature of warfare itself. "Viper 1, this is Reaper 07. We're approaching the extraction corridor. Maintain formation and prepare for potential intercept by unknown aircraft." The warning came just as Kira's radar warning receiver began indicating the presence of aircraft that weren't part of their mission profile. The contacts were approaching from multiple directions, their flight characteristics suggesting military interceptors rather than civilian traffic. Reaper 07, this is Overlord. Unknown aircraft are showing interest in your position. Maintain current heading and speed. Do not deviate from assigned flight path. The instructions were clear but troubling. They were being observed, possibly by military assets that belonged to nations that couldn't be officially acknowledged as involved in the situation. The political implications were staggering, but the immediate concern was maintaining the operational security that would prevent the mission from escalating into international incident. Viper 1, this is Reaper 07. The aircraft closing on our position are showing search patterns consistent with intelligence gathering rather than intercept. They know we're here, but they're not taking hostile action. The observation was tactically sound and politically significant. The unknown aircraft were maintaining the same careful balance of awareness and deniability that characterized operations in the gray areas of international politics. They were acknowledging the presence of Kira and Blackwood's aircraft without taking actions that would force official responses. Overlord, this is Reaper 07. Request permission to acknowledge the presence of unknown aircraft and establish communication. The request was unprecedented in Kira's experience, but it reflected the unique nature of operations that existed in the spaces between official policy and operational necessity. The response came after a delay that suggested consultation with authorities at the highest levels of government. Reaper 07, this is Overlord. You are authorized to establish communication with unknown aircraft, use diplomatic protocols, and maintain plausible deniability. The authorization was both routine and extraordinary. Routine because military pilots communicated with unknown aircraft regularly. Extraordinary because the communication would be conducted in the context of a mission that officially didn't exist. Unknown aircraft, this is Reaper 07. We are conducting routine transit through international airspace. Request your intentions. The response came in accented English that confirmed Kira's suspicions about the nationality of the intercepting aircraft. Reaper 07, this is Falcon Leader. We are conducting routine patrol operations in accordance with international law. Safe travels. The exchange was brief and professional, but it carried layers of meaning that extended far beyond the words being spoken. Both sides were acknowledging the presence of the other, while maintaining the fiction that nothing unusual was occurring. Falcon Leader, this is Reaper 07. Thank you for your professionalism. We appreciate your cooperation. The response came with what sounded like genuine warmth. Reaper 07, this is Falcon Leader. The sky is large enough for all of us, until we meet again. The unknown aircraft peeled away, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as they'd appeared. The encounter had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it had provided a glimpse into the complex web of relationships that existed in the shadow world of special operations. Viper 1, this is Reaper 07. That was handled with unusual grace. It seems we're not the only ones who understand the rules of this particular game. The statement carried both relief and recognition. The mission was being conducted in an environment where multiple nations operated with full knowledge of each other's activities, while maintaining the fiction that those activities didn't exist. The final approach to home base was conducted through airspace that felt almost mundane after the complexity of the previous hours. Kira found herself transitioning from the shadow world of special operations back to the conventional military environment that had defined most of her career. But she understood that the transition was more apparent than real. The mission had changed her understanding of what was possible, what was necessary, and what price was acceptable for operations that pushed the boundaries of official acknowledgement. Meridian Tower, this is Reaper 07, requesting permission to land. The response came from a controller who understood the weight of the words being exchanged. Reaper 07, you are cleared to land. Welcome home. The landing was routine in its execution, but profound in its implications. They had successfully completed a mission that would reshape the balance of power in regions that couldn't be officially acknowledged, using capabilities that didn't officially exist, in coordination with assets that would never be recognized. The taxi to the secure hangar was conducted in silence, but Kira could feel the presence of personnel who were waiting to begin the complex process of mission analysis and documentation that would create the official record of events that had never happened. The paradox was becoming familiar. The most significant operations were often those that left the smallest official footprint. Reaper 07, this is ground control. Taxi to Hangar 7 and shut down engines. Congratulations on a successful mission. The hangar was filled with personnel who moved with the quiet efficiency of people who understood the significance of what had been accomplished. Maintenance crews began the process of returning the aircraft to their conventional configuration, while intelligence personnel prepared for debriefing sessions that would capture every detail of the mission, while maintaining the operational security that would protect the capabilities and methods that had made success possible. Outstanding work, Colonel Hayes said, approaching as they completed their post-flight checks. Initial assessment indicates all objectives were achieved with minimal complications. The statement was typical military understatement, but Kira could see the satisfaction in Hayes's expression. The mission had been a success not just in its immediate objectives, but in its demonstration that the capabilities existed to operate in the most complex threat environments, while maintaining the political cover necessary for operations that push the boundaries of international law. The facility is completely destroyed, Blackwood reported, her voice carrying the professional satisfaction of someone who'd accomplished a difficult task under challenging conditions. Intelligence gathered during the mission suggests the research program was more advanced than our preliminary assessments indicated. The information was troubling but not unexpected. Targets of this significance rarely remained static, and the facility's operators would have been working to accelerate their timelines in response to increased intelligence interest. The mission had been conducted at exactly the right moment to prevent capabilities from being transferred to other locations. The political aftermath is being managed through diplomatic channels, one of the civilian advisors added, his tone carrying the careful neutrality of someone who'd spent years managing information that could reshape international relations. Initial reports suggest the incident is being treated as an industrial accident with no indication of hostile action. The cover story was holding, at least for now. The success of the mission would ultimately be measured not just in military objectives achieved, but in the ability to maintain the fiction that the operation had never occurred. Debriefing begins in 30 minutes, Hayes announced. Take time to decompress, but remember that everything you've experienced today is classified at the highest levels. The reminder was both routine and profound. They had participated in events that would influence international relations for years to come, but their role would never be officially acknowledged. The debriefing session was conducted in the secure conference room where the mission had been planned, but the atmosphere was different now. The tension of pre-mission preparation had been replaced by the satisfaction of successful execution, but beneath that satisfaction lay the complex reality of operations that existed in the gray areas of international politics. The mission exceeded all expectations, Colonel Hayes began, his words carrying the weight of someone who'd witnessed something remarkable. Not only were the primary objectives achieved, but the intelligence gathered during the operation has provided insights into threats we didn't know existed. The statement was both commendation and warning. Success in the shadow world of special operations often revealed additional complexities that required further action, and the mission they just completed had opened doors to operational requirements that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their capabilities and their responsibilities. The facility was producing more than biological weapons, Blackwood reported, her analysis carrying the clinical precision of someone who'd learned to compartmentalize experiences that couldn't be shared. Intelligence gathered during the attack suggests they were developing delivery systems that would have made conventional defense measures obsolete. The revelation was staggering. The mission had prevented not just the development of biological weapons, but the creation of delivery systems that would have fundamentally altered the balance of power in regions that were already unstable. The implications extended far beyond the immediate tactical success. The international response has been carefully managed, one of the civilian advisors added, his tone carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd successfully navigated complex diplomatic waters. The cover story is holding, and there's no indication that the true nature of the operation has been detected. The political success was as important as the military achievement. Operations in the shadow world succeeded or failed, based on their ability to achieve objectives while maintaining the fiction that they'd never occurred. The mission had demonstrated that capabilities existed to operate in the most complex threat environments while preserving the political cover necessary for continued operations. The performance of both pilots was exceptional, Hayes continued, his attention focusing on Kira and Blackwood. The coordination between air assets and ground operations was flawless, and the adaptation to changing conditions demonstrated the kind of tactical flexibility that makes these operations possible. The commendation was genuine, but Kira understood that it also carried expectations for future operations. Success in the shadow world created demand for additional capabilities, and the mission they just completed had demonstrated that those capabilities existed within their squadron. "What's next?" Kira asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "That depends on international developments that we can't predict," Hayes replied. "But I expect we'll be receiving new operational requirements within the next few weeks. The capabilities you've demonstrated are rare, and there are threats emerging that require exactly the kind of skills and experience you've shown." The statement was both promise and warning. The mission had been a success, but it had also demonstrated capabilities that would be in demand for operations that pushed the boundaries of what was technically and politically possible. "The most important thing to remember," Hayes concluded, "is that everything you've experienced today is classified at the highest levels. The mission never happened, the capabilities don't exist, and the results were achieved through means that can't be acknowledged." The reminder was both routine and profound. They had participated in events that would influence international relations for years to come, but their role would never be officially acknowledged. The price of operating in the shadow world was anonymity, and the reward was the knowledge that they had capabilities that could make a difference in conflicts that couldn't be officially acknowledged. "Any questions?" Hayes asked, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of uncertainty or concern. Kira had dozens of questions, but she understood that many of them couldn't be answered in this forum. The mission had been a success, but it had also opened doors to operational requirements that would challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare, diplomacy, and the price of secrets that couldn't be shared. The weeks following the mission settled into a routine that felt deceptively normal. Kira resumed her conventional flying duties, participating in training exercises and administrative tasks that seemed almost mundane after the complexity of special operations. But beneath the surface of routine military life, she could feel the presence of capabilities and responsibilities that had been awakened by their success in the shadow world. Blackwood had reverted to her rookie pilot persona, but the performance was less convincing now. Other squadron members had begun to notice inconsistencies in her behavior, small details that suggested experience and knowledge that didn't match her official background. The careful construction of her cover identity was beginning to show signs of strain. "You know she's not who she claims to be," Rodriguez said during one of their informal conversations in the officers' club. "The way she flies, the way she talks about tactics, the way she handles equipment, none of it matches someone with her supposed experience level." The observation was accurate, but Kira had learned to navigate the complex balance between honesty and operational security that characterized life in the shadow world. "People have different backgrounds," she replied diplomatically. "Some pilots have natural talent that exceeds their official experience." The deflection was accepted, but Kira could see that suspicions were growing. The successful integration of special operations capabilities into conventional military units required careful management of information and expectations, and the strain was beginning to show. "I've been thinking about what happened during that mission," Rodriguez continued. "The way the air defense systems malfunctioned, the way the enemy aircraft seemed to avoid engaging us, the way everything went exactly according to plan. It was almost too perfect." The observation was more perceptive than Rodriguez probably realized. Modern warfare was characterized by chaos, uncertainty, and the constant adaptation to changing conditions. Missions that proceeded exactly according to plan were rare enough to attract attention, especially when they involved capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible. "Sometimes luck favors the prepared," Kira replied, using the kind of military aphorism that discouraged further inquiry while acknowledging the validity of the observation. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Hayes, who approached their table with the measured steps of someone carrying significant news. The expression on his face suggested that the operational requirements he'd predicted were about to become reality. "Sergeant Volkov," he said, his voice carrying the formal tone that preceded important conversations, "I need to speak with you privately." The walk to Hayes's office was conducted in silence, but Kira could feel the weight of new operational requirements approaching. The office itself looked the same as it had during previous briefings, but she understood that the similarity was deceptive. Each conversation in this room revealed new layers of complexity in the shadow world of special operations. "We've received new tasking," Hayes began, his words carrying the weight of missions that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their capabilities and their responsibilities. "The success of our previous operation has created demand for additional capabilities, and higher headquarters has identified targets that require exactly the kind of skills you and Lieutenant Blackwood have demonstrated." The statement was both commendation and warning. Success in the shadow world created exponential demand for additional operations, and the mission they'd completed had demonstrated that their squadron possessed capabilities that were both rare and valuable. "What kind of targets?" Kira asked, though she suspected the answer would involve operations that pushed the boundaries of what was technically and politically possible. "The kind that require pilots who can operate without official support, in hostile territory, against enemies that don't officially exist," Hayes replied, his words echoing the language that had been used during their previous briefing. The mission parameters were becoming familiar, but Kira understood that familiarity was dangerous in the shadow world. Each operation presented unique challenges that required adaptation and innovation, and the enemies they faced were constantly evolving their capabilities in response to demonstrated threats. "Timeline?" she asked. "Immediate. We launch in 72 hours. The mission briefing revealed a target that was both more complex and more dangerous than anything they'd previously encountered. The facility was located in a region where multiple nations maintained competing interests, protected by defensive systems that included conventional military assets, private security contractors, and what appeared to be state-sponsored cyber warfare capabilities. The target is a manufacturing facility that produces components for advanced weapons systems. the intelligence officer explained, his laser pointer highlighting a compound that appeared to be a combination of industrial facility and military installation. Intelligence suggests they're developing capabilities that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in multiple regions. The facility was larger and more heavily defended than their previous target, with defensive systems that included integrated air defense networks, electronic warfare capabilities, and what appeared to be automated defensive systems that didn't fit known threat profiles. The mission would require not just precision flying and tactical awareness, but the ability to adapt to threats that were constantly evolving.